see what would be the most appropriate starting point. And perhaps I should answer the unspoken question that rests in almost every mind as they see a book on Pakistan written by an Indian. Why should an Indian be interested, past, future, or present of Pakistan? This book, as I think Mr. Ibrahim just now mentioned, does not stand in isolation. No book ever does. It is a continuous part of a search that began not as an intellectual effort, but as a living experience. I am a Muslim and proud to be one. I am an Indian and equally proud to be one. But for an accident of geography, my mother would have been in Pakistan. Certainly out of 5 sisters, 4 of them were in Pakistan. I spent much of my childhood in the summer and winter vacations in Lahore. Charmi Gate was where I played. Anarkali Bazaar was where my mother and all went to shop. And in fact, in the 1960s, the Pakistani shop was a far more splendid place than an Indian shop. The first search for these questions of life and death began with a book called India, the Siege Within, in 1980. And certainly in 1984, it was India which was under siege. How, in the course of our own lifetimes, has the siege shifted is among the more fascinating historical transitions that have taken place. Thank you. Let me begin with, in the last few months, certain instances that have taken place in the last, I'm just thinking at random, completely at random. A rabbi called Rabbi Goldberg is sued by 4 Germans in a small town in Bavaria because he indulges in circumcision. Now he's not circumcising other Roman Catholics, he's only circumcising Jews. But Christians sue him. A page of the Quran is burnt in West UP in India. Violence takes place. Somebody has done it. A mosque is burnt in a province, one of the Midwest states of America. A Christian child is picked up in Pakistan and under a very false case of blasphemy is gone through and undergone through the rigors. And I try and link up, okay, what is exactly, yes, and of course, at the very top of this narrative of preposterous malice and hatred is the virulent film against our Prophet ﷺ, which was just produced in America. By somebody unknown, somebody remote. What is it that links all these disparate incidents together? The purpose each time is not to destroy the existence of the other. It isn't as if the Christians think in Germany that they can destroy the existence of the Jews, or indeed that in UP you can destroy the existence of Muslims, or in Pakistan destroy the existence of Christians there. The purpose is something more pernicious. It is to destroy coexistence between human beings. And that is, I think, the essential challenge of our times. In more ways, in minor ways, and in major ways. When we speak of history, as again was so elegantly put by Akbar, let us remember one thing. History is not measured by our lifetimes. We would be very lucky to get 2 or 3 pages when the history of our times is written about our 60s, 70s, or whatever years Allah has given us. History moves at a very slow pace, but it moves according to its own rules and according to its own directions. Even 9/11, what was the purpose of 9/11? The purpose of 9/11 was not to destroy America. The planes that went there did not go there to capture Pentagon, capture the White House and install a new government or conquer America. The purpose was quite, actually, in some ways very simple, to destroy a building coexistence between Muslims in the Western world. And to that extent, it achieved a great deal. Because it set in process. It set in process a reaction, a pernicious reaction even, whether it was in Iraq, whether it was eventually in Afghanistan, that has exaggerated and turned a problem into a septic scar that races across the consciousness of people across the world. So, we are in that age. And then when we link back that this search for coexistence at the intra-national level, at the international level, is really the story of the post-colonial world. Now, why does this story begin in India? And I think at some point when the resolutions of history come, why will it also reach its hopefully positive climax on the Indian subcontinent? The answer is not very difficult. India was the first nation to challenge successfully European colonization. And European colonization was of an order and a strength and a power that was absolutely unprecedented. Today is Gandhiji's birthday. I don't know how old he would have been, but certainly when he was alive, he wanted to live till 125. Sometimes when I look back at that miraculous life, I'm relieved that Gandhiji didn't live till 125, because he should not be punished with reality for what he had conceived. But when Gandhiji set out in his mission in 1915 to remove British colonization, Lord Sinha, who was a member of the Viceroy's Council, a very able barrister, a great barrister, but one of the elite of the times, who thought that British India was good, that was inevitable, looked at this frail man walking around in a wispy dhoti and said, what is this idiot doing? The British Empire will last 400 years. This is 1916, 1917. In 2 years' time, the Khilafat movement, the non-cooperation movement, the first major challenge to British power, challenge to a sun that never set, began. And just go fast forward, merely to illustrate what Gandhiji achieved. In 1962, when Jawaharlal Nehru already, he would die only in 64, but you could see the shadow of age creeping across his face. And his friend, Daya Zinkin, who was the wife of Morris Zinkin, the last finance minister really of the British Empire, they were social friends, and she had come as the Manchester Guardian correspondent, went and met him, and he was looking very tired, and they smoked a cigarette together, and turned around and asked him, this is a kind of journalist will understand it. This is the orbit question which you're tempted to ask when you see the shadow of death on the subject's face. It is never mentioned, but this is the truth. And she asked, what was your greatest achievement of Gandhi? Mind you, neither about himself, Jawaharlal, the questions asked, nor about Gandhi. He didn't say the greatest achievement was the freedom of India. That would have been a pompous answer. Because the freedom of India was achieved by the whole of India, not just by Gandhi and not just by Jawaharlal. His answer was fascinating. He said Gandhi did not liberate us from the British, he liberated India from fear. And the moment he liberated India from fear, it was a question of another 20 or 25 years before the British came. The grip, the powerful, manacled grip of fear on our heart, on our minds, on our ability, on our intellect. Just remember one thing before I move on from colonialism. Nobody comes to conquer a poor country. No one. The reason why the British came is the same reason why every previous invader came. Because in 1750, when statistics were written, and by the way, I haven't picked this up from the latest report of the Planning Commission of India. This is there in Paul Kennedy's book, The Rise and Fall of Empire. In 1750, India had 24.8% of world manufacturing output. That means one good out of 4 produced in the world was produced in India. China had 31%. Between India and China, we produced 50% of the world's goods, manufactured goods. That means we were productive economies. We were not selling iron ore in order to get dollars in our kitty. And indeed, there will come a time very soon when India and China together will again produce 50% of the world's manufactured goods. Britain at that time had 1.8%. In 1947, India had 1.8%. I'm talking about the whole of India, including Pakistan and so on. And Britain had 24%. I haven't seen such a clear definition of colonization as this. So this was the India from which they liberated themselves. But the question in every mind at that time was not, there was no doubt in anyone's mind, Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, rich, poor, everyone wanted the British out. The question really was, what would you do after the British left? The man who picked up the mantle of this question was a remarkable, in my book, everybody can have their own lists, but in my book, the 4 greats of the Indian freedom movement were Gandhi, Maulana Azad, Jinnah and Nehru. 2 of them were Europeans. 2 of them were Europeans in spirit, in thinking, in attitude, and even in their faith systems. Jawaharlal Nehru, no Brahman's breakfast was ever even remotely akin to what Jawaharlal ate for breakfast. And certainly I can tell you, no pious Muslim ever indulged in the minor pleasures that Jinnah indulged through the course of the day. But both actually in their mind and temperament were European. They were products of the interface between the British and India, as was inevitable. The other 2, Gandhi and Azad, they were genuinely believers. For Gandhi, Hinduism was not a metaphor. Hinduism was not some notional philosophy. He believed in Hinduism and he believed in gods. Same with Maulana. Maulana actually believed in every word of the Quran Sharif. Maulana himself was a major scholar of translator. It's very interesting that the 2 who actually believed in religion never accepted a nation in the name of religion. And the 2 who never understood what religion was quickly accepted religion, a nation in the name of religion in 1940. So what really was the battle that was going on? The battle was about the future of communities in India. Now, to the extent that the Pakistan idea was a search for the security of Indian Muslims, it was a legitimate idea. We must not be too critical of the giants of the past, because in 1930s, who really knew what democracy meant? We still, in many places in the world, don't fully know the practical meaning of what democracy is. Many governments deliberately don't want to know the meaning of democracy. But let's just, for the purposes of dropping just a hint of sugar into this discourse. I was in Hong Kong and somebody asked me what is democracy. I said, listen, democracy is not about voting once in 5 years. Democracy is not the right to vote once in every 5 years. Democracy is the right to talk nonsense every day. Even dictators allow me to talk sense. I don't think anyone's talking. It is the right to talk nonsense.
Yes.
So nobody understood. Why should they be able to understood what democracy would mean? So I understand why they set out. But through the course, as long as I said, 1930s, let me tell you something about Jinnah himself. Jinnah, when he emerges onto the Indian stage, turns out to have more clarity, I think, than anyone in his generation about what the issues are, about what the future is. Because he was an absolutely brilliant mind. Indeed, it was said of him by clearly somebody who couldn't get the kind of legal fees he commanded, that Jinnah is the finest barrister who doesn't know the law. Give him any case and he'll argue and he'll win it for you. Jinnah's early ambition, even after he ate his dinners at Lincoln's Inn, that's how they pass. You have to eat dinner and you can be a British aristocrat. So, even after he ate dinners, he actually wrote to his father saying, no, this law business is too utterly boring. What I really want to do is to become an actor. And he actually went and was employed, but a Shakespearean actor. And his greatest ambition was to play Romeo at Old Vic. He knew Shakespeare as well as anyone else, perhaps better than anyone else. Till his last days, his only form, when he was alone and depressed and he was fighting such battles, there will be many a day when he will be depressed. His only form of relief and relaxation used to be over a drink and reciting Shakespeare aloud. Reciting Shakespeare aloud. He was the epitome of Indian Anglian mindset. He understood clearly what the price would be of separate electorates. Thank God in Malaysia you don't have separate electorates. And what the implications of it would be, because he enumerated it, he said so. When in 1906 the first Muslim League deputation went to call on Lord Minto, Jinnah refused to join them. He said, this is laying the seeds of the division of India. And his whole history, track record, was one. It is said that Jinnah cried only thrice. He was, Nuwan's lip was as stiff as his lip. Once, and that was his marriage was straight out of Romeo and Juliet. Absolutely. And if you have a minute, I'll just tell you, his wife was a Parsi. And of course, inter-community marriages were not tough enough as they are now. Imagine in those days. So he was a friend of his wife's father. They were socially in the same Parsi club. They used to play snooker or billiards or whatever it was and cards. And his future father-in-law was one of the great liberals, one of the great liberals of Parsi elites. So one day he said that Mr. Petit, his name was Mr. Petit, he said, Mr. Petit, what do you think of inter-community marriages? Petit, the liberal, said, yes, splendid idea, we should encourage them. He said, oh, in that case, can I marry your daughter? He was immediately kicked out of the house. But you know what, tremendous lawyer. This is when his wife was Rati, was 16. He waited for 2 years because he would never break the law. And at the age of 18, on her birthday, he arrived with the Imam and got married. But that marriage, winter-summer marriage, was not destined to last. And they got estranged. But when she died in 1921, it was the only time Jinnah actually broke down and he cried. Very moving story. I have never read a love letter as moving and as powerful as the last letter Rati wrote to Jinnah. You should read it. Read it. Beautiful. The second time he cried was in 1929, just next year, when the all-party talks on the future of an Indian constitution broke down. And he says, his Parsi secretary tells him that I fear the last hope of Hindu-Muslim unity is gone. He was that committed. Third time he cried, of course, was on 6th of January, and this is from the memoirs of his aides. 6th of January, and the story I was reminded by a news idea. 6th of January 1948, when for the first time he goes to a refugee camp. In Pakistan, Karachi refugee camp is of Hindus. And he looks at it and he can't believe what he has done or what has happened as a consequence. And he says, they used to call me Qaid-e-Azam, now they call me Qatil-e-Azam. Man who Qatil means instigation of death. So, I mean, what I'm trying to say is that this man was an extraordinary broad mind. But something happened along the way. It was called the 1937 elections. And in 1937 elections, the Muslim League, which by that time Jinnah had become the chief of, discovered to its horror, that across the country, in Muslim constituencies, it lost the elections. And the reason was actually not very difficult to see. In Punjab, actually the Muslim League lost every single seat in what is today Pakistan. In the whole of Punjab, it got 2 seats out of 80. In Sindh, 0. Balochistan was not in the frontier, nothing. The reason is not difficult. Because you cannot sell insecurity as an idea to a people who feel secure. Which Muslim in Punjab felt insecure? They were in the command. The Unionist Party was always Arab Muslim people. 40% of the Indian army was Muslim. The British Indian army. And most of them were Punjab. So it was very difficult to sell. And here in 1937, my point about being a great barrister comes into play. What does a lawyer do when he has lost the case? He changes the story. And Jinnah did that. In 1937, after having lost the elections, which was fought on the security of Muslims, he changed the story. And the narrative changed from Muslims in danger to Islam, which is quite a different thing. And then the image of Muslims and Islam being driven out of Spain and so on and so forth, which worked out what Hindus would do as revenge. This line, Islam in danger, has always intrigued me. I almost feel belittled. Trust me when I say, I may not quite sound so, but trust me when I say, I am a truly believing Muslim. For me, religion is not an affectation that I put on. I don't pray 5 times a day, but when I do pray, and I do go on my knees, I truly believe in Allah. For me to hear, and I believe for anyone who believes in Islam, this is restricted to, after all, the reactions of Muslims. It is almost impossible to understand how my faith can be in danger. Islam was not in danger when there was only one Muslim in the world and his name was Muhammad. How can it, if my religion is true, it cannot be in danger. And I do believe my religion. So it was a construct that was created for political purposes. And I dare say, constructed as a fabrication. Because I do and I stress, Islam cannot be in danger. It is a true faith. As a political ploy. You can start and use something, but the consequences are the work of history. When Pakistan was formed, I think the speech that is the answer to Pakistan's problems today remains the speech that started with the creation of, the actual creation of Pakistan, which is Jinnah's speech in the Constituent Assembly, delivered, I think, on 12th August, 3 days before, 2 days before Pakistan was created. And that speech was off the cuff. It was not written. You can see from the script. It was delivered from the heart. And it was delivered by the man who understood and believed that this was the only way to go forward. He said, now that Pakistan has come, you can go to your temples, you can go to your mosque. Let me stress that while the 29 points of Jinnah, which I was talking about in 1929, many have become irrelevant, point number 7 remains the basis of all rational behavior in nationalism, which is full freedom to all faiths. That was point number 7 of Jinnah's famous 14 points. How did Pakistan with Jinnah conceive? You know, if you look at it, all the tensions, all the battles, all the hatreds, all the emotions have now gone by. When the cold light of history looks at events, you come to a startling conclusion that whatever else they may have achieved, nobody achieves perfection. Gandhi and Jinnah were not that far apart. What did Gandhi want? Gandhi wanted a secular nation with a Hindu majority. What did Jinnah want? Jinnah wanted a secular nation with a Muslim majority. And to the extent that that was Jinnah's, it was as viable as Gandhi's. In fact, the original term that Jinnah would use before the word Pakistan came into action was Muslim India. And the moment you use India, you're talking about a complex of relationships between various countries. You're talking about a Malaysia. You're not talking about a unilateral, singular, social, fragmented reality. So it was not that difficult. However, when you have created a nation, avowedly in the name of Islam, the questions will come as it came when the objective resolutions, when in the Constituent Assembly, the objectives resolution of the Pakistan Constitution began to be discussed, introduced by Liaquat Ali Khan. Immediately then, question arose, if Pakistan has been created for Islam, then who is in charge? European elite, whether in the legal fraternity, whether in the civil service, whether in the cantonment, or we, the Maulvi with a long beard and a short pajama? Who shall be in control of its soul? And at that moment, the battle for Pakistan becomes one of the great historic confrontations between the opportunity for a democracy and the encroaching reality of a theocracy. I use my words advisedly, the encroaching reality of a theocracy. It doesn't mean that Pakistan has become theocratic. But what we are seeing is the battle that is going on right there. The question, fundamental question is, Pakistan was created for the security of Muslims. Why has a nation carved out for the security of Muslims become the one place where more Muslims are dying and being killed than any other? This is at the heart. And you have to ask these questions. Because if you don't ask the right questions, you will never get the right answers. Sometimes I know it is difficult from within. And I ask it as a person who is, through the accident of having born a Muslim, is part of the process of looking at the past in order perhaps to find a future. In order to find a future. This is the challenge. I remember a conversation with the great General Ziaul. He was kind for me for reasons which I have not fully understood, but he was. In my first interview with him, maybe he was excited at the fact that a young Muslim, and I'm talking about 78, at 25, 26, I was editing Sunday, which had now the national phenomenon. So he was intrigued at how an Indian Muslim becomes editor and so on. Anyway, he gave me the interview, and among the things that I could not resist asking, because the interview was taken just after Bhutto had been hanged. And the atmosphere was almost, dense with tension. And I said, that you realize, General, that all your opponents say that you have the eyes of a cobra. And he gave a long answer to that. And he was so happy with the answer that he printed 100,000 copies of the interview. and distribute it. But later on, over at least one dinner that he gave me, so we discussed these things. And he said, look, if Pakistan was not born for Islam, then what is it? Just a second-rate India? And that is at the crux of it. At the other end of the argument was one that was led by Maulana Azad. And Maulana was a Maulana. I mean, he was not an artificial Maulana like Maulana Johar, Muhammad Ali and Maulana Shaukat Ali. And it was led by Mahmud Madni's grandfather, who is the head of the Jamaat-e-Ulama in India. It might surprise you that the one person, Jamaat-e-Ulama, and I'm talking about the annual conference of Mahmud Madni, maybe 7,000, 10,000 Maulvis sitting in attendance, and the keynote they asked me to deliver. This year, last year, the year before last. So obviously there's something happening. And they said, nowhere in the history of Islam is there any evidence that a nation, that religion is sufficient as a basis of nationalism. If this had been true, why would there be 22 Arab countries? If this had been true, why would there be Malaysia and Indonesia as separate countries? Why? Islam is a brotherhood. It is not a nation. And it is a powerful brotherhood. But it is a very weak nationhood. Because the ability to create a nation needs, sometimes when you think about it, after all, 53% of Pakistan was what is today Bangladesh. They have had the ability, circumstances, whatever you may call it, to say enough and rebuild themselves as an ethnic nation. Now, I may not be particularly happy at the thought that the Bengalis have left India and gone somewhere else, but it's a rational process. It is ethnic, it is linguistic, and therefore a rational basis for nationalism. Whether they succeed, don't succeed, time will tell. What then is the theme? Why is an Indian writing it? What is the difference between Indians and Pakistan? What is the difference between Indians and Pakistan? Since all of you have met both, you will come to the very happy conclusion there is no difference between Indians and Pakistanis. You're absolutely the same people. The same weaknesses, same strengths, same emotionalism, same aggressive, innate, our aggression carefully hidden under cloaks of non-violence. And ever since we started watching, each other's soap operas, we found that our mothers-in-law are the same age. So why after 60 years? Not that everything is far from perfect in India. But at least why is a nation moving in a particular trajectory? Despite the enormous weight of problems. Nearly as many Muslims live in India as do in Pakistan. Once upon a time, actually, it used to be more. Why is it moving in one trajectory? Because the idea of India is stronger than the Indian. And the idea of Pakistan is weaker than the Pakistan. That is one of them. It's nothing to do with the abilities. You can take the Pakistani civil service, put it in Delhi, and they would do equally well or equally badly. You can take the Indian civil service, put it down, they'll make the same mess. Then they do. There's nothing. It is just that one people is protected. I, as an Indian, am protected. And so, when I have my extreme tensions, as for instance, the conflict over the Babri Mosque in 1992, when I have my extreme situations, like the Sikh insurrection of 1984, which took the life of Mrs. Gandhi, when I have, 84 was the year of the siege within, when I have fire all around me, what happens? Slowly the healing process of a democratic idea brings back into the fold the same Sikhs, the same Akalis who thought that without Anandpur Sahib resolution they would not be able to do it. And over again, today we find that within the Indian Muslim experience, Indian Muslims want a million different things. What they don't want is another partition. Because the price of partition eventually, finally has to be paid by someone. And in this case, it was paid by them. In fact, if you look at the map of United India, just imagine the map of United India. You will realize something very important, that no American warship could have been in the Gulf. No way. The Gulf would be an Indian area of India. Iran would be the neighbor. And there would be a natural counterflow of ideas and so on. There would have been no Iraq without India's. And I think the West understood that. They understood what the military meaning of United India would be, what the economic meaning of United India. It would have been an extraordinary, and actually the relationship between Hindus and Muslims would not have been, it would have been 60-40. It would have been an extraordinary. It sometimes amazes me what we did. All the border states of India would have been Muslim majority, and therefore with Muslim political leadership. Frontier, Punjab, United Bengal, can you imagine that? Instead, the seeds of not just one, two partitions were laid. It doesn't particularly, I mean, we must get to things like, feeling happy about things and sad about things out of the way. Hopefully we are all a bit too, mature enough not to gloat about anyone's condition. Nobody sane in India wants Pakistan to collapse. No way. It is not in India's interest. Even those who hate Pakistan, and certainly I want Pakistan to collapse. It's a dangerous reality, full of toxic poisons, which heaven knows what will happen. In fact, when I think about the immediate future and worry about the arrival of Taliban in Kabul, this time I don't worry about Pakistan's influence on Afghanistan, I worry about Afghanistan's influence on Pakistan. That is what the danger is. That how far the Taliban movement has spread. We can see the reasons why. The reasons are that there is a pattern in Pakistan when people are fed up of civilians, as they were in the 50s, they welcome the army. When they get fed up of the army, they welcome the civilians. Now we're reaching the dangerous point where they are fed up of both. And then the idea of Islamism becomes a very attractive hallucination. But let me pause here and say that this merely is an attempt to understand how the one nation created almost artificially for Muslims, a nation in which Muslims eventually became not only the majority, but from 80% they have become 98% of Pakistan. Majority. A nation which could have been, for all practical, after all, Jinnah's dream was to create a Kamalist, Mustafa Pakistan. That is what he wanted. And instead of that, where is the fritter and what would be the consequences of it for both the regional community as well as the international community? After the events of the last 10-15 years, we know that you cannot remove the impact it will have on the international community. So it is one person's attempt to understand an extremely complex reality. I do not certainly say that these are the perfect answers. I have used a term in the book saying that Pakistan really has become a bit like a jelly state. A jelly state means that unlike butter, it will not melt away. Pakistan will not disappear. No, those who think it will fragment is all nonsense. Nothing will, that sort of thing. It will not disappear, but like jelly, it will continue to quiver. And if it quivers with nuclear power, but more important, with the elements like the spreading influence of Jamaat-e-Islami, it becomes a toxic jihadism. At root, the conflict in Pakistan is between the father of Pakistan, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, and the godfather of Pakistan, Maulana Maududi. And unless the father of Pakistan triumphs in this struggle, there is bad news ahead. Thank you ever so much.